Well, hello and welcome to Association Transformation, the international conversation, the international table at which we converse, dissect, advance everything association and nonprofit. Hello, Andrew Chamberlain. Welcome. Thanks for being with me.
Hi, Lise. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm back off vacation. I'm slightly less pale than I was before. I'm rested. I'm very excited and excited about today's guests. How are you?
I'm good. I'm not back from vacation. I'm not tanned and rested. But I too.
So you're normal. You're the same.
Just usual. Yeah, I'm just the usual. But I too am also looking forward to meeting today's guest, talking through some really quite insightful statistics and data. I'm looking forward to it.
You love data. You love
I do
data.
love a bit of
So
data.
this is right up your alley. I think post-COVID, maybe even during COVID, I think we all became a little more appreciative of data. And as it was one of those few things we could grasp onto while the world was crumbling and we couldn't predict anything. We could at least look retrospectively and I think appreciate and grasp onto statistics and numbers. And we are lucky enough to have with us today Mr. Jay Daughtry. He works with Fontana. He is their client engagement and content creation partner. He's also with ProTech. They kind of work together. And Jay is a friend and neighbor of mine. I'll mention Jay's actually just down the street. We probably could have recorded this like at the local coffee shop. But Jay, thanks for being with us. We're excited to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on today.
So yes, we are in the same zip code. Andrew is
not,
the third
I'm not
wheel
quite in the same zip code. Yeah, I'm not quite.
But Jay, we invited you today. A really exciting discussion has taken place over the last few months. Fontana undertook their third annual state of membership survey, and you guys released those results. You actually provided myself and some other association consultants and experts the opportunity to comment, and we wanted to get you at the table to really hear what you've taken from this, what people are most excited about, and what you really think the most usable pieces of data here are moving forward.
Great. Excited to talk about it.
You know, it was billed as the state of membership, but what I appreciated about this survey was it was about so much more than membership. Yeah, there are data points and questions in here about revenue sources and technologies, digital transformation, industry initiatives. You know, of course, there's the member engagement pieces, but it wasn't that cliche member survey. What's your retention? What's your new? What's your dues revenue? Blah, blah, blah. You know, it really, I thought, encapsulated the full nonprofit ecosystem that is the membership experience. And some of that's behind the scenes and some of that's, you know, in front of the curtain. How did you guys, are these the same questions that you used before? Tell me a little bit about the history of the survey.
Sure. So I may not know the full history. We did our first survey in 2018. We did a pandemic era survey in 2020 that was really geared toward what associations were dealing with at that time. And with this one, I personally wanted it to be something that would sort of get us back to something we could compare to moving forward. So this is an every other year survey. So when we do this in 2024, my hope is that the vast majority of the questions will be the same at that point, and then we can really get some good comparisons. But like you said, I appreciated the way you said it. I wanted it to be all encompassing so that we're touching on so many different areas that are at the forefront of what associations and nonprofit organizations are dealing with and thinking through at this point.
Yeah, no, it's just got a little bit of everything. I think it gives organizations a great benchmark to see how they're doing it on so many different levels. And you're right. I mean, that 2020 data, that's specific to that storm. I don't know that I'd want to compare against that. That was such a unique time.
Yeah.
But,
and I'll interject this as well. Like personally, I wanted to make sure that the word pandemic or COVID or those kinds of terms were not in this at all. I mean, there's certainly things that allude to that, and in terms of the transition that people and associations made between 2020 and 2021, but I wanted it to be independent of what everybody felt like they were dealing with for so long.
Yeah, no, it's, I know you originally released this information back in late spring and then shared it again with the commentary that was provided by some industry partners. You've lived with this survey now for several months. What's kind of risen to the surface for you as an important takeaway?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like you said, I mean, I probably personally started working on this in January or February. It was released. We got hundreds of replies or responses, and then came out with results in, I believe, May, and then this analysis in July. So yes, I've looked at this from a lot of different angles, helped try to pull some things out of it. And I think there are a lot of things going on here. One is this idea that 78% of survey respondents indicated that the number of their initiatives had increased from 2020 to 2021, right? It was a great time to experiment. It was a great time to listen to your members, what it is that they really needed. And so if they weren't turning it up, I'm not sure what they were doing, right? So that was a big thing as well. I think the other thing that's really struck me, just even in recent days as I've looked at this, is this idea around events and conferences. And I continue to believe that associations rely way too much on events and conferences.
Thank you.
Yes. And this is pulled together. So again, we all got the big scare. Everybody went virtual and then went hybrid, and some of the stats that really stood out to me. And if you tie them together, you kind of get a bigger picture for it. But the most tracked data point for member engagement, event attendance, right? The largest source of non-dues revenue, events and conferences. And then you go to where are their biggest data silos? Conferences and events was still one of the biggest ones. So they're relying on it too much, but they're not tying it all together well enough. And I think associations really have to think about diversifying that revenue and those points of engagement.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you pretty much just touched on the first the piece of data that just stood out to me. Only 14%, 14. I mean, that's absolutely right. Are generating their income from education and certification. Blows my mind. Now, I think a lot of that is linked to what you're saying there, which is they're not necessarily equating the education provision that they're delivering through their annual meetings or their conferences or their events program. They're not necessarily equating the two with perhaps their certification programs. But nonetheless, the fact that our organizations exist primarily for individual, personal, professional development, and yet we're generating less than a fifth. Well, what is that? 40%? It's a sixth of our income from education.
Let Jay do the math. Let Jay do the math.
I think I did pretty good there, actually. I challenge anyone to get my maths wrong. Out of 197% of income, less, but that for me. Just I think speaks volumes that and directly speaks to your point there, Jay, about this continued over reliance on our events platform, and it worries me. It worries me a great deal. Lise, what do you think about that? I mean.
Well, what stood out for me, I know that events and the reliance on them is a nerve that touches, often in for our conversations. But what stood out to me and what I see organizations really struggling with, Jay, you mentioned that 78% said that they're doing more or were doing more during in 2021 than they were doing before. And what I see many organizations struggling with is this now overgrown garden. Yes. People have planted so many new ideas and new initiatives, desperate to keep people, desperate to retain, desperate to appeal and say that they were doing things and being responsive and agile, that now they have this inventory of the old, the new, the relevant, the irrelevant, and it's unsustainable. It is absolutely unsustainable. And instead of doing fewer things better, people are doing everything.
Yeah.
Trying to do everything and be everything to everyone. Yes. That was a big concern to me. And I don't know how we can make even if events are your big thing, how can you make your events great and prioritize and align the necessary resources there when you're keeping all these other plates in the air?
Yeah. And there's so many directions we could go from there, but I will say this. I've said for a long time, associations are great about putting information out, about creating new things, but they're not so good about editing and pulling back and making decisions to discontinue things, right? But I think gone are the days where you can just say, hey, we have an annual conference, we have a publication, we have membership benefits. That's who we are. That's what we do. I think they've got to think through more of what it is that their members actually need and find creative ways to provide those. And those things that they provide now may not be the same things they provide 5 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it should be so much more about the why and not the what.
Yes.
Everyone's so focused on the what.
Yes.
And, a piece of that and what leads me to even longer term concerns about nonprofits and associations is the admittance that only 50% say that they're engaging younger members. What?
Well, I'd be interested. Yeah, I mean, that stood out for me, but I think I'd like to know further than that is how they're defining younger members. I work with
engaging.
I work with yeah, true. I work with one organization that defines, I mean, it's good for me. They define younger members as being, aged between 45 and 55. That's their younger member. I mean, come on.
Those kids, what are they doing?
Those crazy generation
Those whippersnappers. No, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities to mine, to ask more questions. And I think there's so much great positivity here that we're moving in the right direction. I just, I admit it. I'm a glass half empty person. I'm a pessimist. And
you are.
there were some things here that concerned me. And to your point about the reliance on events and whether hybrid, virtual, or otherwise, people said 75% of them said that they're doing that to address challenges. And only 50% said they're working to engage younger members. So what the heck are the other 50% doing? I just don't want the survival and the arrival in a post-COVID world to make us all think, oh, we've accomplished it. We're done. We're safe. We've survived. Great. Pat ourselves on the back and think that evolution is over.
I mean, I think that's interesting that I think as we're moving further and further away from, pandemic and COVID in 2020 and 2021, I'm now beginning to question if the change, what am I actually no, I lost my train of thought there, and it was really profound as well. It's probably the best thing I was going to say on this pod, actually. No, that's right. It was the best ever thought I'd ever had, and it was gone in a flash.
Jay, I deal with this all, but Jay, this is what I deal with. So thank you for your patience.
Sorry for you two. You're all up bright and early in the morning. You're still on your coffee fix. I'm like coming to the end of my day. I'm just struggling to get to.
Sorry,
to
let me get my violin out. Hold on.
What I was going to say is it's really interesting. The statistics and the data in this report have they've triggered a thought I've had for a while now, which is as we're moving away from the pandemic, was this question around organizations they just need to survive and get through it? Was that the anomaly? Was that indicative of the pandemic? Or, you said, well, what are the other 50% of the organizations doing? And I'm beginning to wonder if survival is just what they were doing for quite a long time before the pandemic.
Right.
And go on, Jay, I can see you.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think associations are still using the pandemic as an excuse. I still hear this. And you can hear this,
absolutely.
I call associations on a regular, weekly, daily basis. And the number of voicemails that I get to that say something like, we're working remotely because of the pandemic. It's like, I shouldn't even know that. I mean, I should just get right to your voicemail, right to your extension without knowing where you are geographically and how the pandemic is impacting you 2.5 years later. So,
yeah. So, Fontiva sponsored this, and I want to give them credit for spending the time and the money doing this. Obviously, they're vested in associations' prioritization of data and the tools necessary to do that. Were you surprised or disappointed at all about organizations' commitment to data? I mean, maybe that's good news for Fontiva that there's a lot of room for improvement, but with when you asked associations how effectively are you using engagement data to make decisions, 65% said neutral. I mean, if that's not people saying we're not using it at all, we just don't want to admit it, that was
Yes.
a funny admittance, I thought, on 65% of people. 20% admitted, hey, we're not good at this. Another 65% said neutral.
We're not sure if we're not good at it.
Maybe they're not even right. Maybe they don't even know.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, here's another perspective I have on associations. I think so first of all, we know a lot of associations, the staff members are wearing multiple hats. They've got a number of things they're dealing with. And a lot of times they're just thinking about the next thing they have to get to, that event, the membership dues renewal, whatever it is, right? And so, I mean, I've heard people make comments almost along the lines of, I can't think strategically, I'm too busy, right? Like, and that's kind of a notorious thing, I think, for associations. And I think data for a lot of associations is a great, nice to have, but they're still making decisions without really processing that data. And so I'm not surprised.
And I think that is pointing to, because I've been particularly, I feel at the moment, we've been chatting for 20 minutes and I want to pull us back and say, look, this, let's not undermine the hard work and the endeavor that association professionals are continuing on a daily basis. And I've been pretty brutal about some of the data I'm looking at and thinking, dear God, but actually, you're absolutely right, Jay. Membership organizations are grossly under-resourced for a variety of reasons. I think some of that is they are unfortunately victims of circumstance. But I think sometimes there is a hesitancy for boards to make an investment. And indeed, I work with a lot of, and you're the same, Elisa, no doubt. You work with association teams who are, basically running things on the shoestring while sitting on a significant reserve because there's this reluctance to make an investment. And this is exactly the type of data that our boards should be drawing on to feel confident in making their investment. And for me, the other piece of data I'm seeing here that is linked to that, we're trying to run everything on a shoestring. We're overstretched. We're wearing multiple hats. The tools we've got aren't necessarily fit for purpose. And the other piece of data that really stands out for me is that less than 40% of respondents indicate that their management software actually helps them achieve their organizational revenue goals. I mean, good God, how much does this industry spend on software on an annual basis? It's mind-blowing. That should, quite frankly, if it's not 100%, then the software industry is doing us a disservice, a massive disservice. And so I think, again, when we're talking about boards needing data and information to feel comfortable and confident in making those investment decisions, for me, that piece there around the IT systems that are absolutely critical, the technology is absolutely critical in sustaining the work and the daily endeavor of our association colleagues, our professional colleagues. That, for me, that 62% of respondents are struggling to make any useful use of this software is mind-blowing. I mean, that's just crazy. And sadly, points to something I think we've all of us have been sort of wondering about for quite a while, I would argue.
And here's the other thing is that a lot of associations are not capitalizing on what their software does. And that can come about in a few different ways. It could have to do with automations. They're not really doing it or doing it completely. They're not doing integrations the way they should be or not doing them completely. But the biggest thing that I would say about it is that associations that are not continuing to invest in their people skills in that software, right? So keep in mind, you might have bought a new system 5 years ago and you trained your staff 5 years ago, but since then the software has grown and your staff has changed, right? And you need to invest in ongoing training and you need to invest in your users group, either the online community and or their users conference. But too many associations, I think, say, well, we've already been trained on it. We've already bought the software. And what else in your life would you do that with, where you've got a sizable investment, but you refuse to train yourself in its ongoing use?
Yeah.
And I come from an association background where those who had access to and were trained in the software were like this elite force. They were kept very separate in a different department. And if you wanted a report or you wanted something exported, you went to them. And I hope that there's a shift now as we all become more tech savvy in our lives out of necessity, and in our social lives, that people, I don't know, they integrate the use of these softwares across all staff. I mean, if we're all wearing multiple hats, cross-train me. Let me be self-sufficient in this software so we can all make use of it. We can all be, I don't know, I'm sure there's a cost to that, but I mean, don't lock away the database people.
Yeah, but the opportunity cost of not doing it is far outweighs any initial investment of actually getting all of your team trained up on your management software. And it's not a question of, as we're becoming more tech savvy, we're all tech savvy now. Everybody, we've had computers sitting in front of us for decades. It's not a question of ability anymore. It's just a question of whether we're willing to put our hands in our pockets and pay for the training. And as usual, and this goes back to my very first point about that only 14% are generating significant income from, they're only generating 14% of income from education. This goes back to my point about the value that is placed on education and professional training and development. And internally, we're not seeing the willingness to invest on our staff's skills and competencies and abilities.
Yeah. Well, and there's a staff component too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jay, but I know as staff, we get stuck in status quo, and some long tenured staff don't want to learn new systems. They're not the easiest. And I think there's a staff ownership here as well, and accountability that everyone on staff has to commit to this culture. And that's really what it is a culture. We can't just point fingers and rely on and blame the software. And we have to make it work for us.
Yeah, and I would just say that more and more staffs are probably using their software across the board. And when we're talking about association management software, systems like ProTech built on Microsoft or Fontana built on Salesforce, they're either more intuitive or they're using sort of functionality that most people who work in an office are already used to. Yeah. So to Andrew's point, most of us are comfortable with technology at this point in our lives, and it shouldn't be a segregated, siloed kind of experience.
Right. Well, as we think about the data that's available, I looked at this one question and it stood out to me because it attempted to define what member engagement is.
Yes.
It asked, what elements of member engagement is your association tracking?
Yes.
And it listed, 8, 9 options, everything from chapter participation to event attendance, web analytics, product purchases, and responses varied. I was concerned that people aren't tracking chapter participation or volunteerism at a very high level, but it showed me how much data there really is. All of those buckets have potential. The data exists. This is about integration. This is about automation. This is about channeling all these sources of data because it's all out there. People are interacting with associations in a variety of ways, and there's so much to be captured. There's so much potential data to learn from that gave me hope. That gave me, a sense of optimism around where we could go.
Absolutely. And to that point of chapter participation, one of the things I wonder, and obviously this is not true in every industry for every association, but a lot of times you might have a local association, then a state or provincial association. Then you have a national, international association, right? They're not always good about sharing information with each other. And some of them don't have the technology to do it the right way. But I wonder sometimes if somebody's got the data, it's not getting passed up or passed down.
Right.
But the national or international offices sometimes are removed from that level of engagement as well.
So how do we take this data beyond how do we think how to phrase this? How do we take this data beyond engagement? How do we start talking about impact? And this is the perennial issue. As long as I've been working in the industry, it's like, oh God, it's just, we'd need like a 50-year longitudinal study to work out if the association's having any impact whatsoever, which is why we look at how many tweets and LinkedIn followers we've got, because it's immediate, it's in our face. But that's not impact, that's engagement. And even then, the varied levels of engagement. What do we do? How do we start as organizations taking this as our kind of foundation, and then start looking at impact, the impact that we're having?
I think that's a great question, Andrew. And again, we alluded to this earlier. I mean, I've been in and around this survey for 6-7 months now. And again, the more I look at it, the more I see, right? And I'm not working at an association where I'm trying to do something.
Yeah.
But I think as a starting point, you can look at this and you can fall on almost any end of the spectrum on any of these questions and still have something more to do with it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, the question that asked, where are you on this journey of digital transformation? And I know that some of the things that Elisa and others brought out is this 8% who said we've arrived. Well, you probably never really arrived.
It's not a destination.
No.
Right. You can. And so in some level, that may be the fault of the question or the fault of the potential answers. But at the same time, it should make people think, well, what makes us think we have arrived? Because there are going to be new technologies. There's going to be new ways to employ technologies. And you've got to have somebody looking on that. Now, again, maybe you can feel good about we're ahead of 80, 85, 90% of our peers, but you got to keep doing stuff to stay at that level, right? And so if I was an executive director and I was looking at the survey, I'd have a few other people in my organization looking at it. Let's talk about it. What are we doing right? What are we doing not as well? What can we do differently? And how can we capitalize on this? And again, the more you dig into this, the more there are going to be things that you can use this as a mirror, if you will, to think about your own organization.
Yeah. So important. I mean, and that's what I meant when I said at the beginning, this is really about the ecosystem of not just membership, but associations and all of their moving parts, all their systems. And Jay, we so appreciate you breaking this down for us. Fontiva, thank you for doing this again. We look forward to the 2024 and hope that there are some important trends and benchmarks that bear out. So Jay, thank you for your time today. Andrew, thank you for actually reading the report and doing your homework.
Oh, come on. That's not fair.
Well, it was clear that you read it and really looked into it, and I appreciate it. Thank you for your insights today.
That it's on my screen in front of me right now. No, you're right. No, do you know what? All joking aside, this is a really good report. And actually, as we're talking here, and Jay, you mentioned this earlier on, you were saying, you come back and you look at the data again, you see fresh things, you see new directions. And actually, I think I'm looking at this thinking there are so many questions that we on this podcast can start taking apart and start analyzing. So I think we're definitely going to be taking this as the foundation of an awful lot of our conversations over the next, between now and the next iteration of the report in 24.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we will have you back before 2024. But thank you again for your time. This was an important report. Lastly, where can people go to find the report?
So you can go to associationplatforms.com and find the link there. We'll also provide the link in conjunction with this podcast.
Yeah, we'll put it in the program notes. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Again, if you have any questions for Jay, for Andrew, myself, or any ideas for topics moving forward, please reach out. You can find Association Transformation on Apple, on Google, on Spotify, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And we look forward to advancing this conversation and many others moving forward. So make us one of your favorites. And until next time, we ask you to put your members and your mission first.